Namaskar, my name is Shishir. People talk about D-Day. Today we are going to talk about T-Day. T-Day, which is the taxation day. October 1 is the date when the new norms for the TCS as well as the clarificatory law, what the government is saying for online gaming, casinos and horse racing are coming into effect. So talk about all those things. We have two experts. One, Divakar Vijayasarthy is founder and CEO of DVS Advisor. And we have Sandeep Chilana, tax expert and online gaming lawyer. Divakar, let me start with you. When we are talking about the TCS norms, that's a tax collected at source. And one thing is very clear that there is no change for the education as well as for the medical purpose. The only thing we are going to see on the overseas travel package and the other expenses. For a common man, what does this mean?
Brilliant. Thanks for having me, Shir. TCS was not part of the original levy of income tax. It came in the year 1988 when Mr. N.T. Tiwari was the finance minister. And he said, we will bring in TCS as an anti-evasion measure to complete assessment for people dealing in certain products. So the original intent of TCS was to bring in an anti-evasion measure. And somewhere down the line, at least the way the current regulation is, it looks to be an anti-dilution of forex measure, you could say. I mean, so the fundamental premise of TCS is now gradually evolving to whatever it is today. For a common man, now coming back to your question of what it means for a common man, foreign travel necessarily would be expensive, because if you see the language, what they have used, only if you hire a tour package operator, then you would end up paying a 20% TCS. But if I were to go to Clear Trip or Make My Trip or any of those travel websites and buy tickets online or book hotels on booking.com, the scenario is exactly the same, where it is where it is today. So to that extent, the challenge could be on people who are running these packages and not the end consumers. So consumers are now desisted from that. But every other LRS remittance, which people are going to make a remittance on, is now going to be taxed at. There will be a 20%. You can't use the word tax. It becomes expensive, and then you can collect it by way of refunds. If the amounts what you're paying at this point is not is more than what your self-assessment tax is going to be.
Okay. Divakar, I will ask one more question before going to Sandeep. There's a threshold of 7 lakh rupees. Right. So before the 7 lakh rupees, it is 5%. After the 7 lakh rupees, it's 20%. Right. What is the significance of rupees 7 lakh threshold?
See, I believe it would have been $10,000 when the dollar to INR exchange was $70. Probably that would have been the thought process when this issue was mooted. But I'll share with you a very interesting statistic, Shishir. Now, if we see the travel data of people who have traveled from India compared to the pre-COVID levels, it was very interesting, because in India, I think February alone, we've had close to about 2 million passengers traveling from India abroad. So there is a serious volume of people who have left this country. And this is not creating any productive asset within the country. Rather, it is more in terms of a consumption expenditure which is happening abroad. The other important aspect which we need to understand is the ratio of LRS remittances vis-a-vis the forex reserves in our country has been gradually increasing. If you see it in 2017, it was about 3%. But for 2022-23, it's almost 5% of our forex reserves. Possibly the government would have felt the drain is now starting to make some relevance. Might as well put a check before it becomes alarming.
Sandeep, let me ask you about this online gaming, casinos and horse racing thing. The government is saying that it is clarificatory in nature. This amendment is the clarificatory in nature. While the industry is saying that it is substantive amendment, and substantive amendment should not be introduced from the retrospective date. Of course, the government has always maintained that it is not retrospective. Even today, when we were talking to CBIC chairman, he also repeated the same thing. What is your view on this clarificatory amendment? Should we call it clarificatory amendment or should we call it a substantive amendment in the law?
Sure. So, I think the most important and critical point that we need to understand is that prior to these amendments, there was nothing in law which assumed that playing games of skill for money is equal to betting. Undoubtedly, when GST came in, the law provided that betting, gambling, and lottery would be chargeable to GST. It will be chargeable on the face value, and the rate of tax would be 28%. The primary question that has arisen because of these litigations is that the GST authorities have argued that the money that people put while playing online games of skill also is equivalent to betting. See, for instance, two players were playing a game of chess with money where they put 100 rupees each and the winner gets 200 rupees. This has been the legal position in India for a long time, that games of skill are not equivalent to game of chance. And it is only when you put money in a game where you have a chance to win that qualifies as betting. And with this legal understanding, at least the legal view has always been that if you put money to play a game of skill where every player has an equal possibilities or probabilities to win based on the skill, that is not betting. That is not what betting in plain and simple terms means. And therefore, the position was that if you were playing game of skills for money, there was no tax contemplated under the GST laws as they were drafted. Now, GST authorities have taken a position that whether it is game of skill or game of chance, when two players go online to play the game, there is a bet that is being made, a bet that whoever wins take the money, which is the plain and simple meaning of betting. And therefore, since the very inception of GST, the intention of the GST authorities have been to tax that money also which was placed on playing game of skills. And this is where the gap is. Now, at least insofar as 1st October 2023 is concerned, irrespective of whatever, whether it is right or wrong, at the end of the day, it is now a government's policy decision that we have to respect. And government's policy decision is that online gaming, whether it is skill, chance, or whatever, if you play it for money, it will be deemed as betting and you will have to pay money 28% on the face value that is being put in. But for the past period, Revenue Secretary, after this decision was taken by GST Council, also said that this is only clarificatory. I think while the government's intention still is to fight it out to the extent that it is clarificatory, it is at the end of the day the courts who will have to decide whether game of money put for playing game of skill is equal to betting or not. If the answer to this question is returned as no by the superior court, then the matter would stand decided in favor of SSCs. Now, little bit of legislative history also. This happened with one of the companies who fought it in Karnataka High Court. Karnataka High Court observed this only, that you cannot mix game of skill with game of chance. Betting and gambling refers to those games where the chances of winning are dependent on your luck and not on your skill. And therefore, tax cannot be levied on these transactions. That judgment was challenged by GST authorities in Supreme Court. Supreme Court has stayed the judgment. And therefore, once the Supreme Court stays the judgment, there is an apprehension that at least Supreme Court saw something prima facie wrong with that judgment. but the judgment is, in appeal, and it will be argued before Supreme Court likely on 10th of October when it is fixed for arguments. And we'll have to see what the Supreme Court decides insofar as the long legislative history of differentiating between game of skill and game of chance.
Okay. Sandeep, now the basic question is that when we talk about substantive amendment, many of the arguments are there that the substantive amendment cannot be imposed retrospectively. Number one. Number two, when the show cause notices are issued to many of the online gaming players based on what they collected in the past at the rate of 18%, because they were saying it's a game of skill, it's not a game of chance. Now the law is saying that it is neither game of skill nor game of chance. I mean, those two words, those two terms have already completely removed from the amendment. The basic issue is that will the so-called notices issued to many of the online gamings will stand with the judicial scrutiny?
Definitely. There would definitely be scrutiny, as you said. See, insofar as the recent amendments are concerned, those amendments have clarified the position with respect to future period, where they have carved out a new category of actionable claims in online gaming. And to that extent, that is something which is binding on all the online gaming players or industry. Insofar as past period is concerned, the government has to substantiate that without these substantive changes existing in law, they still had power to tax the gaming companies with respect to the at 28% on the face value of the bet or face value of the money that was being put by the players. So this definitely is going to be challenged, but because one of the company has already challenged it and is before Supreme Court, if Supreme Court decides either way, that is applicable to all the industry. Okay. So what has happened is, as soon as the Supreme Court stayed the decision of Karnataka High Court, within next 5 to 10 days, almost all companies received the show cause notices. Yeah. So the fate of this whole industry is dependent on the judgment of Supreme Court now.
Okay, so that October 10 is very critical date for online gaming companies as well as the casinos and the horse racing also. Now coming to Divakar. Divakar, one thing which is very clear, that credit card spending, spending through the international credit card abroad is not going to be the part of LRS as of now. But this is considered to be one of the highest spender and which goes unnoticed. How do you see this kind of move when the notification which was issued in May, it is put on abeyance, which is the major source of LRS, major source of forex spending?
I mean, great question, Shishir. But I think the reason probably why they have put this on hold is not because of benevolence, but because of a constraint in the hands of the service providers. Because currently they have expressed their inability to cope up with the tech backend which is required to enable the provisions of TCS. So it's only a temporary reprieve in our limited understanding of the scenario, where over time, this would effectively become applicable on overseas credit card expenses as well. I mean, as you rightly pointed out, that is a least friction and highest utilized way of spending abroad. And definitely there is no way by which the government would keep that out. So the credit card lobby has so far been successful in pushing the goalpost. I'm sure it won't be long before we get to see that also being included within these provisions.
Okay. Sandeep, coming to you now, there is a confusion between online gaming and online money gaming. Because here, when we are talking about 28% uniform taxation, that is only on the online money gaming, not on all sorts of online gaming. Can you please explain the difference between online gaming and online money gaming so that our viewers can understand it much clearly?
Definitely. See, any game that is played online is online gaming, and that game can be a game where you as a single user can play without there being any multiple player, without there being any requirement of any money This can be a game which you have purchased, or this can be a free game that is available online. So for instance, you're playing, there are various websites, you can say MPL or Miniclip, or you can go log in, play the game. That is an online game. Online money game has been defined in the GST amendment as those online games which are played for money, where the money is put in with an intention to compete against each other and win.
Okay.
Right? Online money gaming also, the definition is wide enough to include also those games which include online games where in-app purchases are enabled.
Okay.
Where while playing the games, you can buy items or online currencies, online, in games you can upgrade your games to buying guns or buying dresses or all those things. So all those things are covered. The primary intention of this amendment is to cover those games where people are putting in money to compete and win,
Okay.
whether it be fantasy games or other games.
Okay. Divakar, I will just continue with the online gaming. Suppose that I spend some money through my debit card or through credit card to participate in online gaming, which has a server abroad.
Yes.
Will that be covered under LRS, and will there be applicability of 28% GST? At the same time, we have to pay 30% of whatsoever the TCS rate is there. So what kind of scenario you can explain to us?
You won't believe this is what was running in my mind when Sandeep was explaining, because my son plays Fortnite and he buys guns, he buys
Real guns?
I mean, as of now, it's not allowed in India. But I know what to buy, Shishir. So in Fortnite, he used to buy these guns, weapons, and whatever for a price. And they also buy what is called as V-Bucks. Now, from the language which Sandeep was explaining and going through the new TCS, both seem to be applicable. One, there could be GST. It's a game, it's a place where they compete because he plays alongside 100 people at the same time. And it could be interpreted as a game of skill or chance because you never know where the bullet is going to come. And there's a 28% GST, and probably there is a 20% TCS on the transaction as well. Because the money, as of now, if you use a credit card, it's still fine. But if you're going to use a debit card to pay, there's a 20% TCS.
No, Divakar, let me just clarify. Even I'm using the credit card at home, my domestic card or the card which is international credit card, but I'm using in India.
Yes.
In that situation, both
Yes.
the taxes will be applicable?
No, I think it's only GST will be applicable. TCS will not apply.
Even using at India, because earlier the confusion was that if you are using your credit card domestically to purchase something which has a server abroad or which has the marketplace like Amazon UK or Amazon USA, there I have to pay TCS.
Correct. Even
so
now,
when your son is playing game, he's buying something here through the online gaming platform. In that situation, TCS will be applicable or not through the credit card?
Through the credit card, okay. To my knowledge, TCS will not be applicable at this point in time because not of an exemption given, but more because of the infrastructure challenge. But once the exemption is, the infrastructure is set in place, then automatically TCS will start falling in place.
Okay. Sandeep, one question is about this implementation issue. Now we are almost ready to implement it from October 1. And there's a big question that especially the overseas servers, of course, we have made some changes in the IGST, and where it has been said that they will require to be they will require to get registered in India, then only they will be able to provide services here. But we all know that dealing with the overseas platforms are not so easy. How do you see this is going to create another set of difficulty for the domestic player?
So I think that's a very, very critical issue that is impacting the industry also. See, industry may be willing to accept the taxes that the government intend to impose them, so long as the competition is fair and they can survive. The challenge that industry has also highlighted, and which I as a consultant also feel is a very critical challenge, is it possible to for foreign companies to mushroom up in one of these tax havens where India has less control and continue to provide these games to the people who want to play for money, but and still continue to avoid the taxes? Now, there is some historical knowledge that we have with respect to implementation challenges in a similar situation. Currently in India, we have a concept that we call as OIDAR services, online database and access and retrieval services.
Right.
All these online subscriptions, online downloads of games, licenses, books, journals, periodicals that we buy online. If an end user is buying it from a portal which is based out of India, the law requires that that portal should appoint someone in India, take a GST registration, and pay GST on the monies that have been received from individuals in India. And at least insofar as my experience of last 6 years in GST is concerned, the implementation and enforcement of that has been limited to big companies like Google and Apple and Microsoft of the world. All the small companies, who are cropping up somewhere, popping in the night and then going away in the morning, have been effectively able to evade the taxes. The government understood this challenge, and therefore they have incorporated a specific provision in the law that casts an obligation on a foreign company to take registration and discharge taxes. The question that would be, how will the government ensure extraterritorial enforcement of this law? And as of now, I do not think that there is effective mechanism that exists where government can go and recover the taxes. And the only thing that is reasonably possible for the government is to ban the ISPs or direct the ISPs to ban those websites in India. But whether that will solve the problem, whether a website being blocked can crop up with one extra X or one extra A in the next morning and the players would know where to go, is a challenge that government will have to look at, especially keeping in mind that these leakages would really hurt the domestic industry, who have brought in a lot of investment and spent a lot of time to develop the infrastructure for this new generation economy. So this would be critical.
Okay. Divakar, my final question to you, that I will continue with the online gaming, horse racing and casino. Since I have the advantage because you deal with both direct taxes as well as the indirect taxes. So when we are talking about October 1 implementation, one thing we have noticed that when the CGST Act amendment and IGST Act amendment were notified, there were no appointed date in the notification. And it was said that the appointed date will be notified later. Now, one of the problem is that since this kind of amendment will be possible when all the 28 states and 2 union territories with the legislature have amended their law. As of now, what we understand that not all of them had done so. So will it be possible to implement the law from October 1 when some of the state or a union territory has not amended SGST? Sandeep, what's your take, please?
In so far as applicability of law is concerned, the intention is that the GST has to be implemented simultaneously across the country. Legally speaking, a state can start implementation so long as CGST Act and the SGST Act of that state have been amended. But that is not the intention. If there is any challenge in so far, and that is what we have seen in past also, so there have been instances where amendments have been made and states have taken time to bring about those amendments because legislative assemblies were not sitting or some state was in election, etc. The timelines have been pushed. So if at all there would be some states that would be left in enacting the state GST amendments in line with the CGST Act amendments, it is expected that the timelines would be pushed.
Okay. Divakar, my final take on TCS. I mean, I think you are more comfortable in TCS, sir. So now we are in a situation when the medical and education, you don't have to pay extra, but still there are some issues related with the some expenses for education. Like if a student is not staying in the hostel and he's staying outside, will that also attract the TCS? Or in case of medical, when the attendant is not staying, attendant is a part of the patient package, but he's not staying in the hospital, any expenditure on the attendant, will this attract TCS?
See, again, here let's get into the spirit of the notification which has been issued, Shishir. Notification very clearly says about exemption would the concessional rates of TCS will apply for both medical as well as education, which will cover the cost of treatment when it comes to medical, cost of accommodation of one attendant who flies in alongside the patient, the air travel, the accommodation, as well as the incidental expenses which are required. If there are challenges, this has also been raised internally. What if the hospital does not allow the patient attendant to stay with them? Our understanding is it should be allowed. It would be allowed. Fall within the concessional rate because it fits within the premise of exemption which has been provided under the law.
Okay. So Sandeep and Vijay, both of you, thank you very much for giving a detailed explanation to the issues or to the questions which are in the mind of people. So thank you very much for joining us.